How to get the Linux Bash shell on Windows 10. Want quick and easy access to Linux on your Windows PC? The best option is to use the Windows subsystem for Linux. This gives you a Linux Bash shell, a terminal window running in Windows. But how do you get this on Windows 10? First included with the 2018 Windows 10 Anniversary Update and rolled out to all users in the Fall Creators Update. Windows Subsystem for Linux basically lets you run Linux software in Windows 10. This is a feature that has been built into Windows. Unlike installing Linux in a virtual machine, the Windows Subsystem for Linux can be instantly called from the Start menu. Once the Windows Subsystem for Linux is installed on Windows 10, you can run Linux in command line mode. Want to run Linux on your Windows PC? Here's how to run a Linux desktop within Windows using the Windows Subsystem for Linux. Before you get started, make sure you're running a 64-bit version of Windows 10. Sadly, the Windows Subsystem for Linux will not work on 32-bit systems. Check if your computer is running a 32-bit or a 64-bit version of Windows. What's the difference between 32-bit and 64-bit Windows? Here's a simple explanation and how to check which version you have. To check your computer for 64-bit compatibility, press Win+I to open Settings. Then System greater than About. Under Device Specifications, you'll see the system type listed for Windows Subsystem for Linux. This should read 64-bit operating system. Is your Windows 10 installation limited to 3.75 GB of RAM because it's the 32-bit version? We show you how to upgrade to 64-bit, so you can finally enjoy advanced features and performance. Ready to install Bash on Windows? Start by clicking Start and entering Turn Windows. The Turn Windows features on our off item should be displayed, so click this to open. Wait while the list is populated. Then scroll down to Windows Subsystem for Linux. You will be prompted to restart Windows, so follow this instruction. Upon restarting, open Start greater than Windows Store. Use the search tool to find entries relating to Linux and select the first option. Run Windows on Linux. Select your preferred Linux version to install. Whichever one you choose will determine the Bash experience. For example, if you select Kali Linux, you will be able to use commands specific to that operating system. Install the Linux operating system. Then wait. Once complete, click Launch from within the Windows Store or open it from the Start menu. On the first run, you will be prompted to input a username and password to create a user account. Other methods are available to launch your chosen Linux environment. From the Start menu, you can enter. Both will display as a run command that can be selected to instantly open Bash shell. The difference with using either of these methods is that they open in the MNT/C Windows System32 directory. This means you can browse the System32 subdirectory in Windows 10. Note that it is not possible to damage Windows 10 using the Linux environment. Any commands you input will damage only the Windows subsystem for Linux and the chosen operating system. Windows 10 will remain safe and secure. With the Linux Bash shell running in Windows 10, you can input a variety of command line instructions. Well, naturally, both systems are quite different. With the PowerShell or command prompt, you're limited to commands that are particular to Windows. This means, for example, using the dir command to view the contents of a directory in Linux. The equivalent is ls. Basically, the differences between Windows and Linux are what sets these two text environments apart. The advantage of having the Bash shell in Windows 10 is that you can easily access Linux within Windows. This saves time to setting up a virtual machine or rebooting into a dual boot installation of Linux. If you want to run multiple operating systems on one machine, you can either dual boot or use a virtual machine. But which option is better for your case? Standard commands like help will show you how to use the pre-installed apps and tools. For example, apt help will demonstrate the usage of the package manager. You can use sudo apt update to get the latest packages, as you would on a Linux PC. Meanwhile, other standard commands are available. You can check your network connectivity with ifconfig. Check the current directory with pwd. and change to a different directory with cd. Setting up the Windows subsystem for Linux and accessing the Bash shell is easy. It's also quicker than running a virtual machine, and far less complicated than relying on a dual boot. Meanwhile, almost all Linux commands can be used in the Bash shell on Windows. Bit rusty? Or need some help? Check our downloadable guide to Linux command line tricks. Whether you're brand new to Linux, or a seasoned Linux veteran, the command line offers a bevy of uses. Try these tips for mastering the command line. Text source, makeuseof.com.